titled a preliminary legal review and of the implementation of air quality offsets in South Africa. So the outline of my presentation will be as follows. So I will start off by highlighting or rather discussing the necessity of adopting air quality offsets, and thereafter I'll discuss the criticism against engagement with air quality offsets. Secondly, I will discuss air quality offsets within the context of the principle of sustainable development. And I'll also discuss the mitigation hierarchy of air pollution control. I'll also discuss how air quality offsets fits into the South African legal framework. And before I conclude, I'll reflect on the findings of this discussion. So I was going to define for you what air quality offsets are, but that's already been done based on the air quality offsets guidelines. Therefore, I will just get into it. So the necessity of adopting air quality offsets has been largely argued for based on environmental and economic challenges that are brought about as a result of complying fully with minimum emission standards. So financially, ESCOM, for example, has claimed that complying fully with minimum emission standards would result in over 200 billion in capital expenditure plus an additional 5 billion in operational costs. This will impact negatively on the general populace, and particularly those that are poor and are already experiencing energy poverty. Environmentally, the compliance also impacts on environmental imperatives, and this includes that there will be more waste, an increase in waste, and also there will be a need to open up more limestone mines. And lastly, there also is the effect on an increase of a larger water footprint. And I think these are, to some degree, very, it's a moving argument, I think. Well, there's also been criticism against offsets has been highlighted. And the major ones have been that air quality offsets create a leeway to circumvent compliance with core regulations. Sorry, I think I'm over there. Yes. So the criticism has been that air quality offsets create a leeway for polluters to circumvent compliance with minimum emission standards. Also, the implementation of air quality offsets is very problematic currently. It also allows air quality offsets to be set up in priority areas. And lastly, the current implementation of air quality offsets inverts the mitigation hierarchy of pollution control. All right. So South Africa is experiencing major social and economic changes, and these are largely induced by migration, as been pointed out, population growth, and industrial expansion, including also the need to reduce inequality and poverty in the country. So South Africa has industrial hubs, and these industrial hubs, or within these areas, they experience elevated air pollution levels, and some of these hubs have been declared priority areas. So the effects on human health of these industrial hubs is very problematic on the general population, especially in dense low-income settlements. Amid these economic challenges or conditions, South Africa is also characterized by dense low-income settlements who rely mainly on coal and data fuels for domestic cooking and heating. Air quality assessments have indicated that in addition to industrial emissions, domestic fuel burning, unpaved roads, felt fires, and mine dumps are some of the major contributors of poor air quality offsets in these problematic areas. These non-industrial emission sources are generally complex to address, and as such, air quality offsets may provide the opportunity to address these complex sources of pollution. Right. So I want to talk about the mitigation hierarchy as I pointed out in the outline. So Section 2 of NEMA provides the mitigation hierarchy of air pollution control in the country. So in the spirit of sustainable development, air pollution and degradation of the environment must be avoided. But to be realistic, this is very impossible, since the total avoidance of air pollution would require ceasing civilization as we know it. Therefore, where air pollution cannot be avoided, Section 2 requires that it has to be minimized and remedied by the polluter. So one would wonder then, so where do air pollution offsets fit into the mitigation hierarchy? So according to the guideline of air polluter offsets, offsets should only be accepted in the instance where they address significant residual environmental effects after non-compliance and efforts of mitigation have been explored or pursued to the best possible extent. This implies that air quality offsets should be regarded as a mitigation action of last resort. So the sequence of mitigation, therefore, becomes you should first avoid, if you cannot avoid, remedy or minimize, and then offset. So the Africa's legal framework, I argue that it allows for the adoption of air quality offsets. At the very top is Section 24 of this legal framework that provides for an enforceable environmental right. Under this provision, everyone, including current and future generations, has a right to an environment that's not harmful to their own health and well-being. The state, including all spheres of government, particularly local government, as well as all relevant departments, must come together to protect this environmental right. And they should do so by protecting the environment, including the people that live in it, from pollution and degradation. Most importantly, the state should aim to secure ecologically sustainable development while also considering social and economic development. In doing so, the state has to enact legislation and other measures in order to realize this environmental right. So NEMA is the overarching legislative framework for integral management, integral environmental management in the country, and this also includes pollution management. Under NEMA, we also have the duty of care section provided by Section 28 of the Act, and the duty has a pervasive accountability quality that applies to all activity that has the potential to cause, is causing, or may cause, or have caused environmental pollution and degradation. The duty of care can be exercised through air quality offsets. The National Environmental Management Principles under Section 2 of NEMA also contain important principles that can be argued for the necessity or accommodate rather air quality offsets. So the polluter pays principle, which is closely related and supports the duty of care, serves to bill polluters for the pollution that they emit or release into the air, as well as its effects. Accounting for residual environmental impacts ensures that costs are not inappropriately socialized, but affected into the planning and decision-making as part of standard business practice, such as environmental authorizations and EIAs. Environmental justice also requires that negative effects of air pollution should not be distributed in an unjust way such that they affect people, especially the poor or vulnerable groups. This is relevant to air quality offsets, considering that historic bad spatial planning is part of the reason why we sit with this problem today. The cradle to grave principle is also a relevant principle, which states that the responsibility for environmental health and safety of an activity exists throughout its life cycle. This principle feeds into the argument for counterbalancing residual environmental impacts of air quality offsets. We also have environmental sector-specific legislation, NACA, which specifically deals with the protection of air pollution, or air quality rather. The basis for the adoption of air quality offsets is also based on this legislation under Section 43. We also have our standards, National Ambient Air Quality Standards being one of them, which determines acceptable levels of risk emerging from air pollution. We also have the minimum emission standards that aim to reduce the harmful effects of air pollution against the income settlement, and also aim to align their goals with international best practices. Other measures mentioned in Section 24 include the air quality guidelines. They provide the guidance for the adoption of air quality offsets, and they also offer conditions under which air quality offsets must be applied. The strategy to address air pollution against the income settlement is also one of the measures provided for in Section 24 of the Constitution. I argue that the current application or implementation of air quality offsets inverts the mitigation hierarchy of air pollution. Air quality offsets applied in this condition violate the integrity of the mitigation hierarchy of air pollution, in that air quality offsets target mainly to address adverse environmental effects instead of addressing the residual environmental impacts as they are intended. For this reason, one could argue that air quality offsets offer a cosmetic solution to a very complex air pollution problem. However, air quality offsets are a welcome means to enhance sustainable development outcomes and address residential air pollution problems. Potentially, this is one of my findings. Air quality offsets may violate constitutional tenets and legislative provisions. The guidelines do not accurately reflect the constitutional environmental rights. Additionally, the guideline improperly elevates economic growth at the expense of social and economic needs. Ecologically sustainable development may never or should never be subordinate to these other pillars of sustainable development. The fact that South Africa is a developing country experiencing economic and social challenges is no excuse for polluters to operate outside the ambit of the law. One of my findings is that the guideline sends mixed messages with regard to the mitigation hierarchy. For example, it states that the facility must make all the necessary efforts to reduce emissions such that an offset program becomes a complementary measure. The provision suggests in a way a strict application of the mitigation hierarchy. However, in cases where air quality offsets have already been implemented or applied, there are circumstances where emissions will not be minimized before offsets are considered. The implementation for offsets, therefore, threatens to relax core regulations or permit non-compliance for periods of time. In conclusion, air quality offsets has left people divided whether they must be considered as a missing link to sustainable development or they should be regarded as an official authorization to pollute the environment. It is very unseemly to ratify the use of air quality offsets in projects are envisaged to have a significant impact on critical assets such as environments that are sensitive to emissions, and this applies particularly to dense urban settlements. Failure to do so has led people divided and polarized as far as they regard air quality offsets. With some environmental groups regarding air quality offsets as an official authorization to pollute the environment. Be that as it may, air quality offsets are a welcome instrument in the environmental governance toolkit and a potential missing link in achieving sustainable development if properly implemented. Air quality offsets must not be used as an avenue to avoid compliance with regulatory requirements. This could be inconsistent with legislative requirements and a potential to violate constitutional tenets. Lastly, air quality offsets must only be allowed to have correct processes are followed and the enforceability is clear. We can learn lessons from Australia that has shown that proper regulation and commitment for air quality offsets is very essential. Otherwise, we run the risk of net loss of environmental assets and values. Therefore, it is imperative to ensure that offsets are robustly enforced to ensure that they contribute to successful and long-term environmental outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kusha. I can argue that we have a lawyer among us. Any questions for Kusha? I ask. Yes, sir. Avishka, is there any more questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Stephen Brown, and I'm here from Carnspine Marine. Okay, my question is actually one of two directed. Crucial, thank you very much for your presentation, excellent. As well as, subsection to Christie, with regards to the air quality offsets that we're talking about at the moment. Where we are I'm at Carnspine Marine, up other side of Monash. And, not essentially my business, although I've had a lot of input from a lot of learned colleagues that also at these presentations. And they've done good work on our emissions at our facility. One of our partners, well, not one of our partners, one of the other industries in the area has got a problem of encroachment upon them by the community. Obviously now, the people want to get closer to work, because it's, traveling is an expense, so they encroach upon the business. They stay very close to where the business is. And now with the wind changing directions, it's got detrimental effects on the lives, on the health of these people, as well as their children, their peers, etc., etc. The only way to, although they are compliant with regards to their emissions, it's an industry that has got a lot of dust associated with it. What would a person do in that instance? Obviously, you want to prevent the encroachment upon the business, because you can't all of a sudden spend millions to try and limit the emissions. It's not going to happen. It's not justifiable. Other option is to close the facility down and everybody's around good.
All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to highlight that the problem with, first of all, industrial facilities are a magnet for foremost prolate, where people follow where work is. The closer work is, the better for them, right? So we are really sitting with a very tricky problem, because this problem lies across various departments' responsibilities, Department of Health, Housing, etc. Right? So hence I think that this problem requires concerted efforts from all various departments of government in order to see to this problem. Well, that being said, that's where, the challenges of economics, social sphere, and the environment, in order to reconcile all those three pillars, people have to come together to address it, I think. I don't know if I've answered your question.
I will move to Avishka for the second question. Thank you. May I please ask you to be very brief in the interest of time? Thank you.
Sure. So in your interpretation, you landed on that offsets are not aligned to the principles of sustainability. Here lies my confusion, because if you look at NECA, the overarching legislation speaks to the principles of sustainable development, balancing economic and techno-economic, right? Further, if you look at the national framework, it speaks to the principles of best practical environmental option, coupled with informed by cost-benefit analysis. This gives precedence and clearance to the Air Quality Act and subsequently to air quality offsetting. So that doesn't align.
I don't know if you can answer it immediately because my understanding was that you said there was a hierarchy. But I'm not so sure I understood it correctly, but I'm going to answer.
Sorry, on his findings, he has a slide saying that offsetting is not aligned to sustainability. I think it's on your findings slide. So I think your interpretation, if you go back a slide or so, but
I'm sorry.
sorry, if you go back 2 slides to your findings.
Please assist us.
It's just, give it a click and let me go and check it out.
May I ask that we come back to your question at the end of the presentation when Prof comes back? The next speaker is